I'm Margaret Maggie Collins, and I'm 62 years old. For decades, I'd grown used to quiet evenings in the house I shared with my husband for more than 30 years. But one October afternoon, when a deep cough and a high fever forced me to cling to the kitchen counter just to keep from collapsing, I realized I was completely alone. I called my daughter, Claire, just hoping to hear her voice and feel a little warmth from family. Instead, she sighed, said she was busy, and promised to drop some food at my door. No checking in, no coming back, just a bag of takeout turning cold on the porch, and a short, dismissive text. In that moment, standing in the silence of my kitchen, I understood a painful truth. Our bond only existed when it was convenient for Claire. And this wasn't just about a meal or a few sick days. This was about a lifetime of being treated like the background in someone else's story. I had taken enough. If you've ever wondered what happens when a woman who's lived her whole life for her family finally decides to walk away, stay with me. The story I'm about to tell isn't just about a daughter's betrayal. It's about how I took back control of my life. And trust me, the turning point ahead is something you won't want to miss. That night, the sound of rain tapping against my kitchen window felt almost mocking. I sat there with the untouched takeout still on the counter, the steam long gone, the smell faint and greasy. My body ached, my skin felt too tight, and my head throbbed. But none of that compared to the heaviness pressing down on my chest. It wasn't the fever. It was the truth, settling in the truth, that if I disappeared tomorrow, my own daughter wouldn't notice until she needed something. I took 2 spoonfuls of soup and couldn't swallow the rest. The silence in my house was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I reached for my phone once, twice, thinking maybe Claire had changed her mind and decided to call. Each time, the screen was blank. That tiny hope that she might remember I was her mother and not just an obligation died a little more with every minute. By morning, the fever had worsened. My throat burned, my hands shook, and my hair clung to my forehead with sweat. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying the pale, hollowed-out woman staring back at me. "Is this what I've become?" I whispered. Not just sick, but small, invisible. When I finally checked my phone, there it was, a text. For a split second, my heart leapt, but all it said was, "Busy today. Feel better soon." No call, no knock on the door. Just that. I stared at the words until the letters blurred, and then I set the phone down as if it burned. Something shifted in me then, something slow but irreversible, like a foundation settling after years of strain. The next 3 days blurred together. I shuffled between the couch and the bed, making my own tea, taking my own temperature, forcing myself to eat when I could. The house felt bigger than ever, each empty room echoing with memories of when Robert was still alive. Back then, there was always laughter, conversation, a presence that made these walls feel warm. Now they just felt like boundaries holding me in. Somewhere between the second and third day, while the fever was breaking, I started thinking about the last few years. Claire had been distant since her father died. At first, I thought it was grief, but grief fades, and this was different. It was as if she resented me for surviving, for still needing a place in her life when she was ready to move on. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue when she brushed me off, when she skipped my birthday dinner because of a work crisis, when she rolled her eyes at my attempts to take pottery classes or join a book club. It was always the same: my needs, my interests, my feelings were interruptions, and I let it slide every single time. By Friday morning, my fever was gone, but I felt more awake than I had in years. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the steam curling above the mug. That's when the decision came to me clear, calm, and absolute. I was going to disappear, not in some dramatic, movie-worthy way, but quietly, deliberately. I wouldn't fight for scraps of attention anymore. I would build a life where I didn't have to. I thought about the old farmhouse, an hour outside of town, the one Robert's mother had left us before she passed. 40 acres of rolling hills, a creaky porch, oak trees that turned gold in the fall. Claire had dismissed it years ago, saying it was too far from civilization to be useful. That was exactly why it was perfect for me. That afternoon, I pulled out a notebook and started making lists. What I'd need to take, what I could sell, what I'd leave behind. I felt a strange energy building in my chest, like I'd just been given permission to breathe again. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was planning something just for me. By Sunday, I'd researched moving companies, storage units, and even found a real estate agent to rent out my current house. The idea of telling Claire never even crossed my mind. Why would I? She'd made it clear I was an afterthought in her busy, curated life. My leaving wouldn't disrupt her routine, and that was the point. On Monday, I called the realtor. By Tuesday, I had cleaners and contractors scheduled. By Wednesday, there were boxes stacked neatly by the door. When my neighbor, Mrs. Cooper, saw me hauling them to the porch, she tilted her head and asked, "Where are you off to, Maggie?" I smiled, really smiled. For the first time in weeks, somewhere I can breathe, I told her. I didn't tell a soul, not Claire, not Janet, not the handful of friends I still spoke to once in a while. This was my metamorphosis, and it needed the kind of quiet you only get when you stop performing for people who aren't really watching. When I finally stepped into that farmhouse, the air smelled like dust and history. The floors creaked under my feet, the windows stuck halfway, and the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 70s, but sunlight poured in through the front windows in wide golden stripes, and instead of traffic, I heard birds. I stood there in the middle of the living room, closed my eyes, and exhaled. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and my laptop, scrolling through online courses, digital marketing, web design, social media management, skills I'd once thought belonged to people half my age. Now, they looked like keys to doors I hadn't even known existed. I enrolled in 3 classes before midnight. Each payment went through with steady, unshaking hands. As I closed the laptop, I realized something important. I wasn't running away from my old life. I was running towards something entirely new. In the days that followed, I built a rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch while deer wandered near the oak trees. Hours spent learning about content strategies and analytics. Afternoon walks across my property line, feeling my legs grow stronger. Evenings spent drafting business ideas, my mind buzzing with possibilities. The silence that used to scare me now felt intentional, even comforting. Every hour without a text or call from Claire was an hour I could invest in myself. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting by the phone, hoping to be included in someone else's plans. I was making my own. 3 weeks into my new life, the phone finally rang. Claire's name lit up the screen, and I let it buzz for 4 rings before answering. "Mom, where are you? I went by your house, and there's a for rent sign in the yard." Her voice carried an edge of panic, but I heard something else beneath it, the shock of someone realizing the foundation had shifted without them noticing. "I moved," I said simply. "Moved where? Why didn't you tell me?" I looked out at the hills, the leaves turning gold in the afternoon light. I'm discovering I don't need permission to make decisions about my own life. The silence on her end was thick, heavy with all the words we hadn't said in years, and for the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. Claire's silence was the kind that carried more judgment than words ever could. I could almost picture her standing in her pristine kitchen, one manicured hand gripping the phone, eyes darting around as if searching for a way to regain control of the conversation. "Mom, this is crazy," she finally said. "You can't just move without telling anyone. What about your friends, your family?" I almost laughed. Family. The same family who had left me to eat cold takeout on my kitchen counter while I battled a fever alone. "They'll be fine," I said. "Tia meek." It seems they've been functioning just fine without me for years. I could hear the sharp inhale on the other end, like my words had landed harder than she'd expected. Mom, I'm serious. You can't just disappear. Can't I? I asked, looking out at the oak trees, swaying gently in the wind. Seems like I already have. There was another pause, and this one was heavier, like she was recalibrating her strategy mid-conversation. She tried a softer tone. Look, I know things have been strained since Dad passed. I should have been there when you were sick. Work's been insane. The apology was paper thin, and we both knew it. Claire, I said slowly, this isn't about work, it's about priorities. My voice was steady, but I could feel my heart beating faster. This was the first time in years I'd said something to her without cushioning it to protect her feelings. There was no answer, just that faint background noise, the hum of her refrigerator, the muffled sound of a TV somewhere in the house. And then fine, but at least let me come visit so we can talk. I'm busy, I said, borrowing her own words, maybe another time. I ended the call before she could answer. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the adrenaline of finally stepping outside, the role I'd been assigned for so long. The following week, I poured myself into my courses. I learned about branding strategies, SEO, and social media algorithms. I built a website for a local artisan bakery that had been struggling to attract new customers. When the owner saw the design and the early results, she hugged me so tightly I almost cried. "You've given us hope," she said, and in that moment, I realized I'd given myself hope, too. But the peace didn't last long. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Janet called from Phoenix. "Maggie, I just got off the phone with Claire," she began, skipping any small talk. "She's worried about you, says you've moved out to the middle of nowhere and won't answer her calls." "I answer when I want to," I said, "and I moved here because I want to, not because anyone drove me out." There was a sigh on the other end. "I'm not taking sides, but disappearing without telling your daughter." "Janet," I interrupted, "do you remember the last time Claire called you just to check on you without needing something?" There was a pause. "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," I said. "You know as well as I do that our family doesn't just show up for each other anymore. Not unless there's something in it for them." Janet didn't argue. She just said she was planning to visit in a few weeks and hoped I'd be willing to see Claire when she came. I gave her a non-committal, "We'll see," knowing full well what my answer would be. In the meantime, I kept building my life here. I updated the kitchen with fresh paint and new appliances. I planted a garden, rows of herbs and vegetables that I tended to every morning with my coffee in hand. I watched the land change color as autumn deepened golds, reds, and browns blending together like a painting only nature could make. By the time Janet arrived with Claire in tow, it had been nearly 2 months since I'd left my old house. I was outside pruning roses when I saw their car pull up the gravel drive. I didn't rush inside. I didn't smooth my hair or check my reflection. I just kept clipping, letting them come to me. They sat in the car for a few minutes before getting out. Claire looked thinner, but her posture was as rigid as ever. Janet gave me a small, hopeful smile. The kind people wear when they're stepping into a room they know might explode. "Hi, Mom," Claire said carefully. "Claire, Janet," I gestured toward the chairs on the porch. "You're just in time to see the place for the first time." They exchanged a look, clearly thrown by my casualness. Once we sat, the silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I let it. I'd learned the power of not rushing to fill awkward spaces. "Finally," Claire started, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I tilted my head. "Go on." "I know I could have been more available when you were sick. I'm sorry about that. But you have to understand. Work." "Claire," I cut in, "what do you think I needed when I called you that night?" She hesitated. "Support. Someone to take care of you." "And what did you give me instead?" Her eyes flicked toward Janet, as if searching for backup. I was overwhelmed. I should have handled it better. I nodded slowly. You know, for years, I've been the constant in your life, the person you could count on to listen, to show up, to put your needs first. And somewhere along the way, you decided that was my only role. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. I didn't move out here to punish you, Claire. I moved out here to finally live my life without waiting for permission. And if that scares you, maybe you should ask yourself why. The look on her face told me I'd hit closer to the truth than she was comfortable with. We spent the next hour walking through the house. Claire commented on the renovations, asking how much they'd cost, and I told her I'd sold some of Robert's old things to pay for them. When I mentioned the motorcycle, her expression cracked for the first time. You sold Dad's motorcycle. Without asking me. Why would I ask you, I said. You never cared about it until now. It was mine to decide what to do with, and I chose to turn it into something I actually use. Her lips tightened, and I could see the resentment rising in her eyes. By the time we made it back to the porch, I knew exactly where this was headed. Claire wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to manage me back into my old role. But that woman was gone, and she wasn't coming back. The wind had picked up by the time we sat back down on the porch. The oak trees swayed, their golden leaves swirling into little piles across the yard. Claire was staring at me, her jaw tight, like she was holding back something she really wanted to say. Janet shifted in her chair, glancing between us like a referee who'd already seen too many matches end badly. So, Claire began, her voice carefully measured. What's the plan here? You're just going to stay out here forever alone. I leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath me. That's the idea. Her laugh was short and humorless. You think this is healthy? Cutting yourself off from everyone, from me. I'm not cutting myself off, I said evenly. I'm choosing who I let in. That's not the same thing. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Mom, you can't just run away from your life because you're upset. I met her eyes. I'm not running away. I'm running towards something better. There's a difference. That seemed to throw her off, but only for a moment. Better than your family. Better than your daughter. Yes, I said without hesitation. Better than feeling like I'm tolerated instead of valued. Better than being an afterthought. For a moment, the only sound was the rustling of the trees. I could feel Janet stiffen beside us, as if she wanted to smooth everything over before it went too far. But it was already too late for that. And Claire straightened, her tone sharpening. You know, I was going to wait to bring this up, but maybe now's the time. You've still got the house in town sitting there. You're renting it out, right? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, why? Well, I've been thinking. Dylan and I are in a bit of a financial pinch right now, and selling that house could really help. It doesn't make sense for you to hang on to it when you've already got this place. There it was, the real reason for the visit, tucked neatly inside faux concern. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of her words sink in. You want me to sell my house to pay off your debts? I asked. She blinked. It's not just about debts. It's about making smart financial choices. That property is just sitting there. It's generating income. I cut in. It's part of my retirement plan. Retirement plan. She almost scoffed. You're 62, Mom. How much retirement do you think you're going to need? Janet's eyes widened, but she stayed silent. I set my coffee cup down, the ceramic clinking against the table. Claire, that house is mine. Robert and I worked for it. It's not your safety net. She rolled her eyes. Dad would have wanted to help me. The words hit harder than I expected, but I held my ground. Dad would have wanted me to be secure. He trusted me to make those decisions. She crossed her arms. So you're just going to let me struggle, let your own daughter drown. You're not drowning, I said. You're living beyond your means. There's a difference. The silence that followed was colder than the wind sweeping across the porch. I could see her biting back whatever insult was next, her jaw working as she swallowed it down. When she spoke again, Her voice was softer, almost calculated. You know, you've changed. Since Dad died, it's like you're harder, less forgiving. I met her gaze. I'm less willing to be used. That landed like a slap. She flinched, but quickly masked it with a shake of her head. You're twisting everything. I'm trying to help us both, and you're making it sound like I'm some kind of villain. I'm not twisting anything, I said. I'm just finally telling the truth. Janet cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we should all take a break. No, I said firmly. We've been avoiding this conversation for years. We're having it now. Claire exhaled sharply. Fine, if you want honesty, here it is. You've been impossible to deal with since Dad passed. You latch onto these projects, pottery, book clubs, now this whole country businesswoman thing, and you act like they're life-changing. They're not. They're distractions. And deep down, I think you know that. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't let her see it. You think my life is a distraction? I think you're pretending to be happy so you don't have to admit you're lonely. She shot back. It should have hurt, but it didn't. Instead, it clarified everything. No, Claire, I was lonely when I was waiting for your attention. I'm not lonely anymore. I'm free. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle that suddenly had too many missing pieces. I stood up slowly, the wooden boards creaking under my feet. Come inside. There's something I want to show you. They followed me into the living room, where I pulled open a desk drawer and took out a yellowed envelope. I handed it to her. Robert wrote this a few weeks before he died. I found it in his things, but I never told you. Her brow furrowed as she slid the letter out. Janet leaned over to read with her. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know I trust you to live the rest of your life exactly how you want. Don't let anyone make you feel small or guilty for choosing yourself. I've seen how much you've given, and I want you to take the rest for you. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she folded it back up. She didn't meet my eyes. That's what your father wanted, I said quietly, for me to live without apology. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And for the first time in this entire conversation, I felt like she had nothing left to throw at me. Claire set the letter down on the coffee table, like it might burn her fingers if she held it too long. Her shoulders rose and fell with a slow, deliberate breath, the kind people take when they're trying to keep themselves from exploding. Janet shifted beside her, looking at me, as if silently asking whether this was really the right moment to keep going. But I knew there would never be a better time. So that's it, Claire said finally, her voice low and tight. You think a piece of paper gives you permission to just walk away from your family? I leaned against the arm of the sofa, keeping my voice calm. It's not permission, it's affirmation. Your father knew who I was. He knew what I'd been through, and he trusted me to make choices that were right for me. She laughed, but it was sharp, humorless. Right for you. That's all I've heard from you lately. Not what's right for us, or for me, or for anyone else, just you. For the first time in decades, I said, yes, just me. Something in her expression shifted, the controlled politeness cracked, and underneath it, there was something colder. You really don't see it, do you, how selfish you've become? I straightened. No, Claire. What I see is how selfish I've allowed other people to be at my expense. She shook her head slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You've rewritten history. You talk like I've never been there for you, but I have. I came over when Dad was in the hospital. I helped you clean out the garage after he passed. You came when it fit into your schedule, I interrupted. And you left the second it didn't. Those are facts, Claire. Not history rewritten, just remembered without the excuses. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. You're unbelievable. Do you even hear yourself? Do you know what people are going to think when they hear you moved out here and cut yourself off from your own daughter? I smiled, but it wasn't out of amusement. Let them think whatever they want. I've stopped living for appearances. Her eyes narrowed. So this isn't just about me. This is about making a point. You're trying to prove to everyone, to yourself, that you don't need anybody. I folded my arms. I'm not trying to prove anything. I already know it. That's when she went for it. Then maybe you should know that you're not the saint you think you are. You weren't some perfect mother half the time. Dad had to smooth things over because you were too wrapped up in your own moods to notice anyone else. He was the glue in this family, not you. The words hit like a slap, but instead of pain, I felt something else: clarity. This was the truth she'd been carrying for years, hidden under polite conversation and occasional phone calls. I took a step closer. If that's how you really feel, then I guess we're finally being honest. Oh, you want honest? Her voice rose, the mask completely gone now. Here's honest. You didn't move out here for peace. You moved out here because you couldn't handle that Dad's gone, and the world doesn't revolve around you anymore. You wanted to play the tragic widow, start over like some Hallmark movie heroine. Well, newsflash, you're not that inspiring. You're pathetic. There it was again, that word. The one she'd thrown at me before, now delivered with the full force of contempt. Janet gasped softly, but I didn't flinch. "Thank you," I said quietly. Her brow furrowed. For what? For confirming exactly why I left. Claire's face flushed deep red, but she didn't back down. "You think you're so strong, but this," she waved her arm toward the window. "At the garden, the hills beyond, isn't strength. It's hiding. You're hiding from your responsibilities, from your family, from reality." I tilted my head. "And what exactly do you think my responsibilities are, Claire?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "To be a mother, to put your family first, to help when we need it. That's what family does." I stepped closer, my tone still calm. Family supports each other. Family respects boundaries. Family doesn't disappear when someone's sick, only to show up when there's something to gain. That's what family does. She froze, and I saw it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe recognition, maybe guilt, but it passed quickly. "You know what she said. If you want to cut me out, fine. But don't expect me to be there when this little fantasy blows up in your face." "I'm not expecting you to be there," I said. "That's the difference." Janet finally spoke up, her voice small but firm. "Claire, maybe this isn't the way." "Stay out of it, Aunt Janet," Claire snapped, then seemed to catch herself. She looked back at me, her voice suddenly quieter. "I came here to make peace, but clearly, you're too wrapped up in this new version of yourself to see that." I let the silence hang for a beat before answering. "Claire, you didn't come here to make peace. You came here to get something from me, and when you realized you weren't going to get it, you decided to burn the bridge on your way out. That's not peace. That's manipulation." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like the air had stopped moving. Finally, she stood up. "Enjoy your perfect little life out here. Mom, let's see how long it lasts." I stayed seated, watching as she walked toward the door. Janet lingered for a moment, her eyes full of something between pity and understanding. Then she followed Claire out. Through the window, I saw them get into the car. Claire's movements were sharp, clipped, like every gesture was meant to signal she was the one leaving on her own terms. But as they pulled away, I noticed her glance back once, just for a second. When the dust from the gravel road settled, I was alone again, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like space I'd carved out for myself, space I wasn't going to surrender again. I walked over to the desk and slid Robert's letter back into its envelope. My hands lingered on it for a moment before I placed it in the top drawer, exactly where it belonged. For the first time that day, I smiled, not because the conversation had gone well, it hadn't, but because I knew, deep down, I'd finally stopped letting other people write my story. The quiet after they left wasn't the heavy, suffocating kind I used to feel. This was different. This was the kind of silence that felt earned. Like closing a book you'd been trying to finish for too long and realizing you finally don't have to. I made tea, carried it to the porch, and watched the sun dip behind the oak trees. The air was crisp, the kind that bites your cheeks but clears your head. The phone rang later that night. Claire's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. She called again the next morning, then that evening. By the third day, the calls had slowed to one a day, but then the texts started. We need to talk. It's important. You're making a mistake. Please call me back. When I didn't respond, she brought in reinforcements. Janet called first, her voice gentle but urgent. Maggie, she's worried. She's just not good at showing it. She's not worried, I said flatly. She's persistent. That's not the same thing. Janet sighed. At least hear her out. She says she has an idea that could help both of you. That phrase, help both of you, was enough to tell me exactly where this was headed. I still let her keep talking. Though, old habits die hard. 2 days later, Claire called again, and this time I picked up. I wanted to hear exactly how she'd try to package this new pitch. Mom, she started, her tone soft, almost sweet. I've been thinking about the house in town. You could sell it, invest the money, and live even more comfortably out there. And she hesitated, then added, I could help you manage the process. There it was. She'd just dressed up the same request in a shinier box. I already have a plan for that property. I said, what plan? You're just renting it. Exactly. I said, steady income, low stress, no strings attached. She let out a frustrated sigh. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're sitting on a gold mine. You could help me and still have enough left over to do whatever you want. And if I don't want to, I asked. Silence. Then, in a sharper voice, so you'd rather watch your daughter struggle. I'd rather watch my daughter take responsibility for her own life. I said. That's when the sweetness vanished. You know what? Forget it. You've changed. Mom, you've become cold. No, I said evenly. I've stopped volunteering to be used. She hung up without another word. The next week, the calls stopped altogether. The quiet felt even deeper than before, but it wasn't lonely. It was relief. I poured that extra space into my business, signing 2 new clients who came through word-of-mouth referrals. One was a local vineyard, the other a small-town bookstore looking to modernize its online presence. I threw myself into the work, and with each project, my confidence grew. One rainy afternoon, while finalizing a marketing plan, an email notification popped up from a women's shelter I'd started volunteering with. They needed help revamping their website to better reach potential donors. The director wrote, "We heard you're the person to talk to if we want to get this right." I said yes without hesitation. Over the next month, I split my time between paying clients and the shelter project, and somewhere in those late nights, buried in lines of code and fundraising copy, an idea began to take shape. Why not do more than just volunteer? Why not put some of my own resources towards something that actually mattered? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became. I called my attorney. We went over my will. By the end of that meeting, everything was in writing: the farmhouse, the rental house, my business assets, my retirement savings, all designated for causes I believed in. The women's shelter would get the main property. A nonprofit for older women re-entering the workforce would get my business and its income stream. Janet would get a modest bequest because she had shown me real kindness, even when she didn't understand my choices. Claire would get nothing material. What she would get was the knowledge that I trusted her to build her own life without expecting my foundation to hold her up. When the paperwork was signed, I felt something inside me loosen, like a knot I'd been carrying for years had finally unraveled. A few days later, Claire must have caught wind of the will. Maybe Janet mentioned it, or maybe she dug around like she sometimes did when she wanted control. Either way, the phone calls started again. This time, they weren't pleading. They were demanding. "You can't just cut me out like this," she said when I finally answered. "I can," I replied, "and I have." "What about family holidays? What am I supposed to tell people?" "Tell them whatever you want," I said. "Tell them I finally learned how to value myself." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're really doing this to punish me, aren't you?" "I'm doing this to protect myself," I said. "If you can't tell the difference, that's part of the problem." Her voice rose. "You think you're so much better than everyone else now, living out there, playing the independent woman. But deep down, you're just bitter and lonely." I almost smiled. "If I'm so lonely, why do you keep trying to get back in?" That shut her up. The call ended soon after, and I truly knew that whatever happened next, I was done being the version of myself she could manage and manipulate. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat at my desk, outside. The wind rattled the branches, scattering leaves across the yard. Inside, the soft hum of my laptop was the only sound. I opened the shelter's nearly finished website and smiled at the home page. It was bold, clear, inviting exactly the kind of thing that I could pull people in. I thought about the women who would pass through its doors, women who had been told they were nothing without the people who mistreated them, women who would leave with a new sense of self, the same way I had when I drove up this gravel road for the first time. For the first time in years, I felt completely certain I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I should have expected she wouldn't leave it at phone calls. People like Claire don't let go when they think control is slipping through their fingers. Still, I was surprised when, on a chilly Saturday morning, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road and saw her car pulling up the drive. No Janet this time, just Claire. She got out without looking around at the property, as if ignoring it would make it less real. Her heels sank into the damp earth, but she didn't seem to notice. She marched straight toward the porch where I was sitting with my coffee. "Can we talk?" she said. Her voice clipped. "You're already here," I replied. She took a seat without being invited. "I'm just going to say this once. You're making a huge mistake, and you're doing it for all the wrong reasons." I sipped my coffee, waiting for her to elaborate. "You're cutting me out of your will to, what? Make some kind of statement. Prove you're independent. That's petty, Mom, and it's beneath you." I set my mug down. "This isn't about proving anything. It's about making sure my resources go to people who will appreciate and use them. People who haven't spent years dismissing me." She let out a sharp breath through her nose. "You make it sound like I've been horrible to you my whole life. That's not true." I raised an eyebrow. "Tell me, Claire, when was the last time you called just to see how I was? Not because you needed something, not because it was a holiday, just because you wanted to talk." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "That's not fair. I have a busy life, a husband, a job." "And so do I said evenly. "The difference is, I don't use mine as an excuse." Her jaw tightened. "You're twisting this." "No," I said, "I'm finally seeing it clearly." She sat back, crossing her arms. "Fine, if you want the truth. Here it is, we're in trouble. Dylan and I, his last investment tanked. We've got creditors breathing down our necks, and the house might be on the line. Selling your rental would solve everything. You'd still have this place. You'd still have your business. And we could all move on." There it was, not even sugar-coated this time. I let the silence stretch. "So that's why you're here. Not for reconciliation. Not for family. You're here for a bailout." Her face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "I'm here because you're my mother, and I thought you'd want to help." Help is when you offer without strings. What you're asking for is a transaction, and I'm not interested. Her eyes narrowed. "You'd rather leave your daughter in financial ruin than help her." "I'd rather leave my daughter the dignity of solving her own problems," I said. She laughed bitterly. "You're unbelievable. You sit out here in your little farmhouse, pretending you're some kind of saint, when really you're just running away from reality." My reality is that I've spent years giving more than I got, I said, and I'm done pretending that's okay. For a moment, her expression softened, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd reached a crack in her armor. But then her mouth twisted into something colder. You know what Dylan said? He said you've always been like this, holding on to things just to prove a point. You kept Dad's old junk for years when you could have sold it and done something useful. Useful for who, I asked. She hesitated. For the family. Funny, I said, because the last time I checked, you never once asked about those things until you found out I sold them. And the money went to fixing up my life, not yours. That's the real problem, isn't it? You can't stand that I'm finally spending my time, energy, and money on myself. Her cheeks flushed again, but this time with anger. You're twisting it to make yourself look noble, but you're just selfish. I stood, my voice low but steady. If valuing myself makes me selfish in your eyes, I can live with that. She stood too, her movements jerky now. This is insane. You can't just cut me out like I don't matter. You matter, Claire. You just don't get to matter more than my own well-being anymore. Her lips parted, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But instead she shook her head, turned on her heel, and walked back to her car. Halfway there, she stopped and looked over her shoulder. You're going to regret this. I didn't answer. I just sat back down on the porch, picked up my coffee, and took a long sip as she drove away. When the dust settled, I felt the strangest mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because no mother wants to have that kind of conversation with her child. Relief because I finally knew without doubt that I was making the right choice. That evening, I emailed my attorney to confirm the will was exactly as we discussed. No changes, no exceptions. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and got back to work on the Women's Shelter website. A week later, the director called to say donations had already started coming in thanks to the new site. Her voice was bright with excitement, and I could hear the background noise of women laughing and children playing. You've done more for us in a month than we've been able to do in a year, she said. I smiled. That's what happens when you invest in the right places. After the call, I stood on the porch and looked out at the land. The garden was thriving, the air was crisp, and the sky was streaked with orange and pink. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Claire might have been gone from my life in the way she once occupied it, but the space she left behind wasn't empty. It was open, and I intended to fill it with things and people that actually valued me. It had been almost 3 weeks since Claire drove away that Saturday morning. The silence since then had been complete. No calls, no texts, not even through Janet. It was the longest stretch without contact between us in years, and I found myself noticing how much lighter my days felt without the constant push and pull of her expectations. The Women's Shelter site had launched to rave feedback, and my paid work was growing faster than I could take it on. I'd started a wait list for clients, me, a woman who, a few months ago, couldn't even imagine making a living on her own terms, was now in the position of deciding who I wanted to work with. That small fact alone made me feel like I'd climbed a mountain I didn't even know I was on. Then one late afternoon, as I was coming in from pruning the roses, I heard the low hum of an engine. My stomach sank when I saw the familiar car coming up the drive. Claire again, only this time, she didn't get out right away. She sat there for a moment, like she was summoning the nerve to open the door. When she finally did, she didn't march toward me like before. She walked slowly, her eyes on the ground. Her voice, when she spoke, was quieter than I'd heard it in months. Can we talk? I nodded toward the porch chairs. Go ahead. She sat down and stared at her hands for a moment before looking up. I came to say, I'm sorry. I waited. Too many times. I'd accepted half apologies just to keep the peace. I wasn't doing that anymore. She seemed to sense it. I'm sorry for what I said, about you being pathetic. about Dad, about all of it. I was angry and scared and desperate, and I took it out on you." Her voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't rush to comfort her, and I asked gently. Her brow furrowed. "And I don't want this to be the end of us." "That's not enough," I said. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Claire, I'm not looking for just an apology for the words you used. I'm asking if you understand why they came out in the first place. If you understand how you've treated me, not just in the last few months, but for years." She swallowed hard. I know I haven't been as present as I should have been. I know I made excuses when I should have shown up. And I know I've expected you to be there for me without giving you the same in return." It was the closest she'd ever come to true self-awareness, but I could tell she was still holding something back. "And the house?" I asked. Her gaze dropped again. "We're still in trouble financially. I won't lie about that, but I shouldn't have come here expecting you to fix it. That wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't," I said. She looked up, her eyes shiny. "I don't want to lose you over this." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Claire, I love you. You'll always be my daughter. But I'm not going back to the way things were. I won't live in a dynamic where my value depends on what I can give you. That's not love. That's dependency." She flinched, but she didn't argue. "So what does that mean for us?" "It means if you want a relationship, it has to be built on mutual respect, on calls that aren't just about what you need, on visits that aren't negotiations. And it means accepting that this life comes first for me now." She sat very still, as if weighing whether she could agree to that. "I don't know if I can promise to be perfect at it." "I'm not asking for perfect," I said. "I'm asking for genuine." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the roses between us. For a long moment, we just sat there, the air thick with possibility and uncertainty. Finally, she nodded. "I'll try." It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a teary reunion, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. We talked a little longer, about small things, the weather, the garden, the shelter project. When she left, she hugged me. It was tentative, not the effortless embrace of years past, but it was real. After she drove away, I stayed on the porch until the sky went dark, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. I knew this wasn't a neat ending. There would be missteps, maybe even more distance, but I also knew I'd drawn a line that wouldn't be erased. For the first time in my life, I understood that protecting my peace didn't mean shutting people out. It meant setting the terms for how they came in. And that night, as I poured myself a glass of wine and settled in with my laptop, I realized I'd built something far more valuable than reconciliation. I'd built the version of myself I was always meant to be. Looking back, I realized the biggest shift wasn't moving to the farmhouse, or changing my will, or even standing up to Claire. The real change happened inside me. In the quiet moments when I stopped waiting for someone else to decide my worth. I used to believe love meant giving until there was nothing left. Now I understand that love also means respecting your own boundaries, even when it means disappointing the people you care about. Claire and I aren't suddenly best friends. We may never be, but we've started something different, a relationship that has room for honesty, and for the first time, room for me. And if it doesn't last, I know I'll still be okay, because the life I've built here isn't dependent on her approval or anyone's. It's mine. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: it's never too late to reclaim your life, set your boundaries, and choose yourself. The people who truly love you will understand, and the ones who don't were never really there in the first place. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to choose your peace over someone else's comfort, I hope you know you're not alone.